This episode of We Heart Our Lives community contains mature themes. Listeners' discretion is advised. For the purpose of maintaining their confidentiality, names and some identifiable characters have been removed or altered, but their voices and stories are real.
Many people have this idea of what depression should look like, and because of this notion or perception, people can be dismissive about believing that someone is battling with depression because it does not look like this classic stereotypical picture in societal mind. It's as if people need to see your pain in order to believe that there is pain. When an athlete gets hurt on the field or court, you see the visible manifestations of their pain, right? They're held over, they're in agony and despair, and the crowd is like, oh my God, right? People come running to their aid. With depression, it's not so much the same. There's no team really running to your aid to get you back in any game. The same courtesy is often not offered if they do not see your physical pain. The thing about depression is that it is pain. It is physically felt, even if not physically seen. I'll say that again. It is physically felt, even if not physically seen. Depression can weigh on you heavy. For a period of time, I suppressed this invisible pain. Looking back, this actually was my first bout with depression, encountering this depressive period in my life. The next time I felt this round of depression, it just felt like a heavy weight, like I was being weighed down. I was coming through a traumatic experience pretty much alone. The few that knew offered surface comfort. They did the best that they could. But back then, there was no trauma-related centers or no trauma-informed spaces as the growing numbers that there are now, which are still very few. Back then, sleep was my friend and it was my enemy. I didn't have the definition then for what we now know or call anxiety or panic attacks, but those were common manifestations of my depression back then. Like walking through mud, it was murky, it was slow, it was thick, and these were how my thoughts were too. My godly belief, thankfully, did not make me dwell in this realm of actual planning or actions. I didn't think about pills, nor was I taking any type of pills or medication. I didn't think about any knives or anything like that. I said to myself that I'd rather rock out this parentheses dope life sentence, even if I chose not to believe that it was dope. I'd rather rock out this life sentence. It felt like I was going to do this big than face eternal turmoil if I took my life. But there were times back then, even if natural causes prevailed, I told God, I'm okay with that. I'm really good. That was my thoughts back then. I was deeply affected by the most recent loss of comedian actor Robin Williams, which now I just saw that it's been 5 years, but it still feels recent. And that's what loss is, right? It doesn't have a expiration of, oh my God, that's so long ago. It still feels recent. Robin Williams reminded me of a childhood friend who was known to keep crowds in stitches with his humor. I remember this one nostalgic memory pops into my mind of this summer that we all went to the beach on this college break hang. He was in rare form with captivating a whole audience with his humor. At the end of the evening, coming back home, just us alone, he became extremely somber, quiet and still. And I noticed that there was these glints of sadness that was just ebbing through. So I asked him, "Did you have a good time?" And he said, "Yo, Marsh, I spend so much time making everyone laugh, but not once did somebody make me laugh." And with that, he just dropped off to sleep. That was a game changer in knowing something about him for me. Even more recently, your song quote on your website, which is capturing Lil Wayne's lyric insertion in the song Mad, hit me differently when I saw him receive an award and talk about his experience, that raw story. You're blessed if you can actually even discover your root cause while you're going through any dark period of your life. It's usually hindsight for me that reveals. I think hindsight is your best gift, but it's a gift and a curse, right? But in the short episodes that I experienced, and that's not necessarily short, let me be authentic with that. Some of this was kind of years long, especially the second round, because it came in intervals, if you will, right? In the short or longer intervals of episodes I experienced, they all had to do with healing and growth. Okay. So in my hindsight, it was revealed to me that everything, in terms of the two biggest episodic battles that I had with dealing with depressing moments in my life, were surrounded by healing and growth. Neither are weights on my present being right now, although you can have residual traces, right? Your former self is going to constantly pop up and remind you of who you were. And it's to your present self to tell your former self that you have evicted them a long time ago, okay? The change is simple. It's God and it's God-minded people in the biblical sense. The best free medicine on earth and spiritual bound as well. Daily walks with Him during my depression can come with a list of complaints and repeated visitations of the same worries and concerns. You know, when you're depressed and you're talking to people and or God or your journal, it can be a litany of repetition, right? It says the average person thinks 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day. I'm going to say the adult person is on the scale of 60,000 thoughts a day. Many of these thoughts are repeated thoughts, right? And they're actually just like your routines, right? Got to wake up, got to brush my teeth, got to put this, got to do this callback. When you insert depression into that, many of those thoughts are just constant repetitions of why you either feel inadequate, or this wrong has happened to you, or this thing failed, or this person left, or that person this, or this. And it becomes a very I, they, and it does not offer space for answers, right? Which is why meditations is often a beautiful thing, because it interrupts your thoughts. Your thoughts are like a long run-on sentence with no periods. And walks with God, or talks with God, or getting into a space of quieting your mind and meditating puts periods in between those sentences. But in between those sentences, it puts these long gaps of spaces where you can then introduce healing and peace and some solitude and kick some shit for good. Okay? So, a walk with God is where I have my best exploration through self. One of my common things and go-tos, and I've invited people on this, is a walk over the Brooklyn Bridge. If you ever really, really knew me and you ever really rocked out with me from my teenage years to my 20s, the Brooklyn Bridge has been like my holy grail walk. Can't do it so much now because tourism is real, but it was a saving grace for me. The manifestations of prayers and visualizations after this dark period was real. I was on a prayer line every weekday for 3 years, just the three of us. Every day, weekday for 3 years was me and two others, just the three of us. I felt like the freshmen to their PhD levels of faith, spiritual acknowledgement and biblical strength that they had. I didn't, but I hung in there and I grew in there. I had to laugh 3 years later with God of the things that were on a prayer line. I mean, like just the beginning of, hey, I if this thing can happen to 3 years later, done and done. So I give God thanks. It's free. I have free permission to be me. I have had the opportunities, actually, through my prayers, to come into the company and homes of millionaires, just on some regular schmegular hangs, and to discover the bouts of depression, pills, and substance abuse, mental illness that some of them struggled with was like, whoa. In the back of my mind, I'm like, but you had movers lift this unique ass piece of furniture up through your window, okay? Just to get up in here, and you're battling with, and it humbled me and it propelled me to just be cool with regular schmegular, degular, everyday me. Doesn't have to have all the extraness just to be, I've come into the company of folks who I'm sitting there with their $1 million achievements, and it's not even hate on them. Like, I can think of someone who speaks 7 different languages, Hebrew being one of them, and just dope, and would have never known their struggle with certain things that for many of us could seem like surface, because it goes back to that dismissiveness that I talked about in question 1. The prayer line, sis, that's it. As mentioned, as the old cliche or adage goes, prayer changes everything. Don't take it to people, take it to God. Like when Rihanna said, I regret opening up to some people. They don't deserve to know me like that. That hit home. This is organic for each person, as I've mentioned. What was the catapult for me was prayer. But some can say diet, exercise, change of scenery, go on walks. But none of that worked out for me long distance wise, or should I say long lasting wise, than my insertion of God. My workouts became blessed, my travels raised me up, and my encounters, even with depressed millionaires, was confirmations of God's manifestations. My advice is to go to someone who sees you. I work with teenagers and young adults in a high economic need index area, demographics, and bracket. There's so much bottling up that can go on in the hood because of trauma that goes unnoticed or unacknowledged, that the first thing I do is let my students know that I see you. My first travel to the mother continent was Ghana. During my month-long stay in a village there and throughout parts of the city, people would say, I see you instead of hello. That hit differently. I remember being at church spaces and feeling like cliques of people just did not see you. They might give you that little spiritual nod, little hello, and all that, but it just seemed fake, you know. So I want people to know that I see you. Just like folks who I meet and encounter who I'm blessed by the exchange, I felt that I am seen by them, you know. So the first thing I do, and I try my best to do, is see my students, to let them know that I am here and I care. And if they want to talk, they can share with me to their comfort. Sometimes people just want to know what's wrong, just to know what's wrong. My next bit of advice is to recognize that depression is something that's pressing on you like a footprint in the carpet. It can be lifted and it can also fade once you begin to stop pressing on the same spot. Like wearing a heavy coat, or you know how folks wear the weighted vest in the gym. You can take that weight off you. You can lift it off, you know. Last question 11. I'm alive today, and I look forward to God's next level of manifestations of my prayers and just my everyday walk with him. You know, my next done and done. You know, my next like, wow, really? Look at God. All right. Thank you.